welcome to the B2B Growth Blueprint podcast, where we talk with entrepreneurs, founders, and leaders at B2B services, tech, and SaaS companies to learn the systems and processes they've used to create success for their business. We'll also learn from marketing and sales experts to provide insights to help you grow your business. I'm your host, Mark Osborne, and the podcast is brought to you by Modern Revenue Strategies and their 10x ROI B2B growth guarantee. Schedule a free diagnostic call to learn the fastest path to double your B2B revenues in just 90 days. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint podcast. I'm your host, Mark Osborne, and today I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Joshua Monge. So Joshua is the founder and CEO of Think, Adapt, Build. He's a seasoned business leader with over 20 years of experience across industries including food and beverage, finance, manufacturing, marketing, and economic development. And he works today as a fractional COO, and he specializes in helping businesses with revenue between 500,000 to 5 million really streamline their operations, optimize their processes so they can scale efficiently. So Joshua, welcome to the show.
Oh, hey, Mark. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Man, these intros, I love it.
Well, so we've been having some fun sort of catching up a little bit before the show, but for our audience, why don't you tell us a little bit about, sort of your path and how you got to where you are today at Think, Adapt, Build, and, really what you do there.
Okay, so let's start off. So yeah, right now I work, like you said, as a fractional chief operations officer. And I got into that because a friend of mine got me into it. And now I'll go a little bit back to kind of a mile marker in my career. It was February of 2020. I was the director of economic development, and I left the chamber, and it was in a small city. And so I had this opportunity to walk into a COO position, 10 million in revenue, was being brought in by the money guys because the CEO, the business grew really fast and the CEO was making a lot of money. And so he's out skydiving and dude wind up like breaking his back or something. And so there was nobody running the company for a couple of weeks. And so the money guys were like, we need a number two. So February 2020, I'm supposed to walk into this position, but the money guy says, hey, listen, there's this COVID thing going on. So we're going to kind of wait to see how this blows over. And then we'll get you in here. And so 2 years, that's how long COVID was shut down in Oregon, pretty much. So I was like, man, what am I going to do? And so I had to bring something in the business. I had to bring some revenue in because my family likes to eat and have a place to sleep. So I saw everybody going online, and I ran a terrible agency many years ago. And so watching what's happening with economic development stuff and everything else, I was like, okay, I think I can do a single product. So I did SEO audits, and I helped basically people audit their sites and get ready for SEO. Simple. So I got that to 6 figures in 18 months. And and it was because I just kept my operations really simple. I kept my product simple. I knew exactly who I needed to get a hold of. And a buddy of mine who was a fractional CFO for a regional CPA firm was like, Joshua, between what you did at the chamber, the fact that you were going to be COO of this company, and what you've done with your own business, you should get back to helping people. And so I thought, I wonder how I could do that. And so he gave me the instructions on how he kind of set up his fractional CFO practice. And so I basically kind of copied some of those things and put that to market, put that to test, and that took off really well. And so I was a little ahead of the big wave of fractionals, but not super early adopter. So, but anyway, so I've been doing that for a couple of years, and I love helping service-based businesses, like you said, from 500,000 to 5 million in revenue. And businesses can fail from success. And I think that's where we get some of these smaller businesses where they can't quite get forward, is because it's not because they're terrible at what they've done. It's because they're succeeding and there's more complexity. And so I just want to help with that. I want to help people succeed.
I really love that phrase, fail from success. And that's one of the things that we see so often in working with companies is they've been successful, which has sort of gotten them to a certain spot. But one of the things that we actually see is if they aren't paying attention to, some things like, more customers can actually bankrupt them because of cash flow issues or cash forecast issues, or, things like that. What are some of the, sort of failing from success examples that you've seen, companies have, or potentially what are some watch outs for our audience that's listening on, to make sure that they don't get in that situation where they're failing from success?
Yeah, that makes well, think of it it's a little bit like the frog that's in the pot of water that's slowly moving up a
Uh-huh.
few degrees. It's
Uh-huh.
hard to recognize that. So, but I think at some point you do kind of look around and go, man, I think things are getting kind of hot here. So I think some of the signs that that's happening, one is if you're waking up in the morning and you're not excited for going into work,
Yeah.
or or maybe you couldn't even sleep the night. I don't know if you're just what you were like the original when you started this business. You had some passion, some drive, some energy, and then here you are, and it's on the other end of that. That's a very strong sign that you need to change. You probably need to change things. That or die of a heart attack. I don't know. It's up to you, but just kidding. But definitely want to change. I think the other part is with the increase complexity as a business grows, you start adding people. Those people have different relationships and dynamics. You add new products, different service vendors, whatever. It gets complex. So then if you don't have somebody that's managing that complexity, then it's most likely falling on you as the owner. And so you're basically probably working somewhere between 60 to 80 hours a week, and
Yeah.
so that's another sign that you probably want to change things up. And then the other piece that I would say is when you're growing, if you keep replacing people and people don't stay, and you're just constantly turning people over, um, your listeners probably aren't going to enjoy this, but if you have a problem in your business, it's usually a reflection of leadership. And so there's a statement out there that's this stinky fish rots from the head. So we
Mm,
probably need some leadership upgrading, because how you ran your business when it was just you or you and two people is a lot different than when it's you and 5, 10, 20
yeah.
people. So um, you have to shift gears, and you have to basically be prepared to kind of run a different type of race at that stage.
Yeah. That's so interesting to hear you say that too, because we see very similar things. And we actually, talk a lot about how, B2B growth systems set you free. Like that's sort of our slogan. And, it's free from that sort of stress and worry about like, are the revenues going to come in? Am I going to hit forecasts? Because you've got a system, you've got some leading indicators, and you have some confidence of that, free from that sort of strife that comes from teams fighting with each other because it's like, well, you didn't do your job or you failed at it. Versus if you've got a system, you can say, well, the system failed us. How do we collaborate together
That's
uh,
smart.
to
Yeah.
improve the system? And
Yeah.
then so just having to do it all yourself because you can't outsource it to anybody is one of the big failings that people have when they don't have systems too.
It's interesting that you say that, because basically too, you're also freedom from being the bottleneck, right? So
That's right.
so if you have a system in place and you're delegating responsibility and authority, and then you're actually leveraging your team to do all of that work. And so ideally you can be, I think one business broker called it an absentee owner. Like that's
Yeah.
his, if you're actually a business owner. And then I've talked to someone else that was basically saying, if you can't walk away from your business or take a vacation, essentially you have a job. And
That's
for
right.
some people here, they don't have a very nice job. Calculate all the hours you actually work and stress and don't eat and don't everything else, times what you actually get in your distributions. I did this for one client. She was almost at 1 million in revenue, and she came out to $7 an hour is what she was making. So yeah, there's
Well,
if you do the math and you're making $7 an hour and you're like in your $1 million business, yeah, you
yeah,
probably need some help.
you might need some systems. Well, and that concept of the idea of building a job versus building a business,
Yeah,
and the value that comes from, having the documentation that really makes it a business instead of just a job that all lives between your ears.
yeah.
And I know that you've done a lot of work working with your clients to sort of create some of that documentation. What is that? How do you do that? How does someone go from, that they had all the ideas in their head and they grew it, and then they brought somebody in to help them, and then they brought somebody else in to help them, and if they've kind of been, just going so fast that they haven't had time to sort of create some of this operationalization to support the growth. How do you take them from there to a place where they're not going crazy and they've got some process documentation? What does that process look like?
Oh my gosh, I love the setup because essentially the imagery that I always kind of cast is the bus is on fire and the wheels are coming off. And
Oh,
so that's usually where I show up, or someone's like, hey, by the way, you should talk to Joshua because, anyway. So one, put out the fires. Like, there's some key business aspects of the business that definitely need attention. And, if you could spend 5 minutes just kind of sitting off to the side and actually thinking about what you need to get done, put the fires out. That's step one. And then step two is to actually look at what your processes are and then start documenting those. And I'm a big fan of continuous improvement. And so the idea is that even your first pass at writing something down of what that looks like, that's more documentation than you had, a while ago when it was all in your head. And so I think documenting those processes kind of on a meta level. So every business has to do some sort of client awareness, right? I mean, you have
yeah,
to get your product in the marketplace. There's always some sort of intake that you have to do. So what's that process look like? You have to accept money, right? Everybody has
yeah,
to pay something. You have to do some sort of fulfillment, and then there's some sort of reporting out on that, and then a continual marketing effort. So if you break it down into those pieces and kind of document those are core business functions that pretty much any business, whether it's a law firm or a lawn care person or even a hospital, they still have that kind of pipeline of what that customer journey looks like or
yeah,
customer experiences. So I would say definitely start there and then write it down. Like it doesn't count if you don't write it down. I've met so many people that are like, oh yeah, we got processes. Great. Show me.
yeah.
They're like, oh, well, I know this, and then Bob over there knows something,
Right.
Mary over there. And it's like, if you write it down and actually get it into a binder, then the nice thing now is, and I think you were alluding to this earlier, this is kind of like the arbiter of any of those miscommunication situations, because then you go back and say, well, what did we all agree to, or what did we all write down? And then you kind of go back to that binder, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's where we made the mistake. Maybe somebody forgot or wasn't trained, or but then that becomes the focal point. And so I mean, I love operations. I think if this was something everybody mastered, then I definitely would be okay not being able to do that. I would just figure out something else to go do. But for now, it's operations definitely seems to be an area that people need to focus on a little more. So
That's so interesting. Well, and you talked about sort of creating focus, and that's one of the things that we see. We work primarily with folks in sort of revenue systems, but that includes things like marketing and things like sales and even things like customer success, where you're trying to grow an existing account. And so often companies just don't even know where to start. And so even just by starting to document some of your performance metrics of, well, what number of leads are we getting on a month? And what number of clients are churning or are growing? Or how long does it take something to go through the sales process? Just getting that baseline metric, then you can go find some benchmarks. And we've built some benchmarks that we use for folks. But then you can start to say, oh, well, these metrics, my benchmarks I'm really bad against the benchmarks. I'll focus there first. And that's sort of like that sucking chest wound that you got to get healed up. And then, but just having that ability to focus one place instead of having to, try to, eat the whole elephant in one bite
yeah.
can be a big change for people.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, maybe I'm a little for being an operations person, maybe I'm still a little hippy dippy, kind of warm and fuzzy, but I really feel like business owners, if they had if they could take some time and reflect on what's happening, I think they can usually identify where those choke points are or where some of those frustration points are. And so, you know, I'm I want to say I'm dogmatic when it comes to like processes and like what you need to build out, but how and when, that's kind of up to you because that's what got you to the place that you are, right?
That's
So if
right.
you're
Yeah.
yeah, so if you're a business owner, it's you had some intuition, you had some skill, you had some luck, you had some opportunities, that you still need that to navigate the rest of this road. It's not like you shut your brain off and then,
Right.
you
That's
know,
right.
yeah, yeah. Because even with the marketing stuff, right? Like you still need to, you'll give them options of what they can do, but they have to make a decision like, oh, I think the market's going to do this, or man, I really enjoyed this piece. Like this is the direction I want to go. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, we actually see that, having a system creates an opportunity for more creativity. Like it doesn't shut because then you've got a baseline of what works.
yeah.
And you've got some baseline, performance metrics of, well, when we do it like this, we get this outcome. Now we can all collaborate on, well, what could make it better? And then you can measure the thing. But if you don't have it written down, you don't know if you're actually trying something new or if you're just sort of going with the whim. Like systems instead make it so that your best self always shows up.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because one of my clients, an interior designer, she was like hitting her head up against the 1 million mark and couldn't quite get there. And I was talking to her and I was like, she wanted to hire another designer, which like that there's some complexities because essentially they're hiring their competition
Yeah,
and they have to like train the person, but then they don't want them to do it. It's a
right.
complex thing to do. So then I was looking at her processes and I was like, man, she does a lot of administrative work, the interior designer herself. And so we started doing process maps. We got through about 6 of them, and I created a lane for an executive assistant. And she's like, I don't have money and I don't have time for this. And there's not enough work for an administrative assistant. I was like, just watch. And so we built in a lane and we took, like updating client into Basecamp and sending like the basic emails and intake forms, all that little administrative work. Started moving into the lane. She kept pulling things out because she's like, no, I'm the only one that can do it. I was like, you're not the only one that can enter a client information
Right.
into the project management system. Um, and so then we were doing it, and then she started realizing, so she started throwing things in there. By the time we were done, we took those lanes and all of those little tasks and we wrote up a job description. There you go. So then so then she hired an EA a week later. And well, I mean, once we were done, it was a week later. And like within the first week, she got 20 hours of her life back because
Right.
all of that small little stuff was done. So then as a creative person, she definitely just took that time she got back and reinvested it. And so when we parted ways, she was in the process of expanding into a showroom and moving into a warehouse facility because
Yeah.
she had that creativity like to do that now because she wasn't bogged down by all like the day-to-day grindy stuff of the job.
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny too, like to hearing you describe how you help, like, you don't have to think about sort of operationalizing and creating processes, this giant activity that's gonna, just sort of overwhelm your life. And, some people think about, oh, I have to document, every single aspect. You don't. And in fact, one of the things that we do oftentimes is we'll bring in sort of a documentarian that just sort of watches what you do. And so you just kind of continue doing what you normally do. And we just sort of capture it down, get some bullet points, have you read through it one time, be like, yeah, that's pretty much it. Like there's your first,
Yes.
draft of a process. It can be really not nearly as painful as people expect.
Well, because people hear it like, oh, I need SOP. Like the warning sign for me is when someone says, oh, we need to get SOPs. I
Uh-huh.
was like, oh my gosh, that's like saying, you know, um, we need oh gosh, like peas in our carrots for our stew. And like, what kind of stew are you making? Like
Right.
let's get back to like some of the meta stuff because do you need an SOP on like how to enter in the customer information into the QuickBooks or like whatever accounting system you're using? Yeah, maybe, but some data entry you can kind of, do okay with. But if you can't even figure out where the data is coming from or like making sure that you're asking all the right questions up front right away from the client, um, you know, those are the bigger things that need to be addressed. And
That's
so
right.
to your
Don't
point,
don't
yeah.
worry about whether you require a middle initial or not. First worry about, are
Yeah.
you getting their name?
Yeah. Uh, yeah. And I think too, also looking at some of your processes, we had another client. She showed me an email chain and it was about 3 hours of work over a $25 receipt that the team couldn't figure out where it went. And so and she's like,
Wow.
"Why do I have to put up with this BS?" And I was like, well, one, you let it happen. And two, like, what's the lowest level person in this chain? What's their authorization level to actually make decisions?
Right.
What do you mean? I was like if this person spent $25, $100, $500, like where would you be upset? She goes, "Oh," she goes, "I don't care if anything under $100, like I don't want to worry about it." I was like, great.
Right.
Now let's make a rule here then that the employees, anything under 100, just take care of it. Still let us know and report it, but because we don't want a series of $100 decisions being made.
Right.
But yeah, so then basically, again, that was one of the things that she knew was a problem, but she just couldn't figure out how to address. Great, let's just talk through it, come up with a system for it and then figure out how to solve that problem.
That's awesome. So I heard you talking before about, like moving things into lanes. And when you and I were chatting before the recording, talking about sort of a process visualization. And so, for our audience, something like 40% of the population is primarily visual. And so if you're just talking through things or you're having them just read SOPs, that 40% or more of your staff is lost, or at least not doing their best work. Talk to us a little bit about the importance of visualizing some processes and how you do that with your clients.
Yeah, I think the reason why process visualization works so well is okay, yes, 40% of people will that makes sense. The other piece to it though is then it's also about spatial relationships. So when you actually see that there's a sequence of events, right? And then it's going, the nice thing with these maps is you can also see the different lanes. And so when it goes from sales to customer service, all of a sudden you can see like why it's important to capture the client information correct, because you pass it over to customer service. Now they got to deal with it. And
Yeah.
um, you're able to see those relationships and those connections. And then the other piece to this, I mean, when we make these for people, is then we'll take all of the steps and put them in kind of a big long document, and then you can put time elements to it so you know exactly how long each thing takes. You could put dollar values to it. You could put quality standards. I mean, there's just so much you could do with these visual maps. And the nice thing is that everybody can see it all in one place. And so I think even the people that comprehend in other ways, when they see that there's actually a map to what those flow, I think that adds a lot of value to them.
Yeah. So you shared with us at the beginning that you're working with businesses between sort of 500,000 to kind of 5 million, and sort of doing these operational solutions. Give us the pitch. Like, so if there's someone that's listening and they're recognizing a little bit of, man, maybe I am the bottleneck too often. Maybe I am working too many of the hours myself. But so they're thinking about maybe improving their operations. Why should they do it with you?
Well, I think the other piece to this is I'm very economically minded. And so operations could be seen as something like, oh, I'm trying to cut overhead. That's why I'm going to hire an operations person. But, we can actually identify revenue opportunities. We can identify, costs, but also at like ratios. And so I think, I don't know, for myself, like I'm always trying to tie it back to, providing more value than I'm capturing, i.e., hey, you're paying me this flat rate and it's costing you X, but I'm providing Y.
Yeah.
And so that's, I'm very mindful of it. In fact, even those process maps, they're one of the reasons why I do it. And some people are like, well, can't you use other tools or systems? Sure, but the way I do it, it's very clean. And then you can actually go get that copyrighted, and now it becomes IP. That IP, now you can put that in your operations binder. And so when you go for evaluation, or if you want to get finance or anything, you can actually show how your processes work. And so that visualization actually increases the value of your business, you know. And in one case for our doctor's office, we had a 2x valuation because of what we were able to document and prove.
Wow.
Um, so
Definitely a strong return on that investment.
so yeah, so for me, I'm like, I'm economically minded, so I'm making sure I'm providing way more value. So I think that's kind of my pitch. I'm pretty easygoing. I think I respect business owners, and I think the only qualification I have is that, you need to be in a place to learn and be flexible. If you can do that, then great. I think we can work together, and I'm not here to tell you, well, your business is terrible or good or what hey, it is what it is. You want to get out of this maze? There are some options, and I always try to present things as options and choice. And then the areas where I am a little stickler is some of the documentation, but because I want to make sure that's documented in a way that other people can approach and use it. So I don't know. You're the marketing guy, man. A better pitch for that. I don't know. But
We'll refine that later. Well, this is obviously an area we're both really passionate about and operationalizing it and growing through that. So we could probably talk about it all day, but I got to be mindful of your time. But Joshua, it's been a great time chatting with you. Before we go, why don't you tell us something that's on the horizon for you that you're excited about in your business?
ooh, that's an interesting one. Yeah. I'm actually slowly expanding my team, and so I've been talking to business brokers pretty routinely about creating operations binders and trying to get people prepared
Uh-huh.
for potential exit at any time, whether it's because of divorce or health, or you get an
Yeah.
offer from somebody outside and you don't even know how to value your business. So I'm creating a more formal process for that. And then I'm drinking my own Kool-Aid here with that and creating processes to train up with team members so that they could do it. And then we can also bring the price down because then we can get other people to help do that. So it's something I'm working on, and I'm excited. I think probably Q2 of 25, we might try to expand that out.
Very exciting. Well, Joshua, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time and all your insights on sort of how to get your life back through operationalizing your business. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Mark, so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. This was super fun.
Yeah, talk to you more soon.
Alrighty. Bye.
Thank you for joining this episode of the B2B Growth Blueprint podcast. We hope you've gained insights to grow your business. If you enjoyed this discussion, please rate, comment, like on your favorite platform, and share to others who will find it useful. Do you know a CEO, founder, or leader at an early stage B2B services, tech, or SaaS company who would like to be a guest and share their story? Send us a note. Let's schedule a conversation.